Hey guys, it's John here. What you're about to watch is another practice test review that I did for one of my students in Mission 1400 Plus, which is my school community. You can join with the link in description below. This student got a 1350 on this practice test. It was a blue book test. And in this video, I'm going to go over all of the stuff that I said to him in terms of how to improve the reading and writing, how to improve the math, and some specific questions he actually wanted me to go over. As always, if you want me to review one of your practice tests as well, just join Mission 1400 Plus with the link in description below. I do one of these for every single new member there in the community, so it should definitely help you a lot. Okay guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Hey, so here's that test review video. So I think you're going to find this very useful. Obviously, you got a 1350 on this SAT practice test, which is very good, though I know it wasn't really much of an improvement from where you were before. But I think I know some pretty clear things to try to improve based off of what I saw you do over the course of this practice test in both sections. So first things I will just say are that I definitely liked a lot of what you did throughout this test. It seemed like you're using a lot of the right strategies for reading and writing, and also for math as well. Like, there are many things I wasn't sure if you're going to be able to do that well in math, just knowing your past scores and everything, but you did them actually, quite well as I saw you go through the test. So really good job with all that stuff. Here are some recommendations I would have. These are listed in order of what I think is the most important to the least important, so keep that in mind. For reading and writing, first thing, the order of the test. I noticed here you started with the vocab and then you went to the grammar and then you did the transitions and then you did the student notes and then you went back to the passages. Pretty much exactly what I'd recommend. The only thing is I honestly would just say go put vocab right here. So right after you do student notes ones, just go back to the beginning of the test and go through all of that and then the passage questions. I don't think this is going to have super big of an impact, but I think it could have some pretty valuable downstream effects in terms of just your overall strategy and mindset when taking the test. The fact that you'll be having the easiest questions right at the beginning should give you some really good momentum and also might help a little bit with timing. I might say probably not a crazy amount, but at least a little bit. So first thing I just want to say, because it's such a big thing in terms of the test as a whole. Second thing here is the grammar skill. So this is something I pretty much say this to everybody. I think I can probably notice this on pretty much every practice test I ever see. But yeah, definitely for the grammar questions, you had very high accuracy, I'm pretty sure. But it seemed like some of them you were just feeling a little bit unsure with. Like, for example, there was one, I think, there with a colon versus the word while or something, where just like you were selecting an answer and you didn't feel like you're that sure about it. You were spending a lot of time re-looking it over again and again. The solution to this is just get more comfortable with these specific grammar rules. So what I mean by this is specifically stuff like, if it's an independent clause and then another independent clause, which things can you use to separate that? Just knowing that alone makes these problems so much easier because now you realize, okay, if it is two independent clauses, it literally can only be, for example, a semicolon. If all the other ones are definitely not independent clause separations, you just know going into it, you're not going to be able to use that. So for the verbs, like remembering the rules about singular plural, I think you had that down, but also remembering stuff with like verb tense, like had. I think that was one question I saw that you spent a bit more time on. I think you got it right, but yeah, had is a really important thing to be able to fully understand the rule behind it. And yeah, just a couple other things with like independent, dependent clauses. There might have been a few mistakes there, but yeah, understanding these specific rules makes it so much easier because you almost just feel like you have grammar just fully understood when you know these rules. It's like you can just look at a problem and just say, okay, I know for sure it must be this answer because I know the rule behind it. So really try to work on that, but I think you probably are improving already a pretty good amount with that. Third thing here is the comprehension of the passages and all the passages on the reading section. This is something where I think you're doing a pretty good job with it, I would guess, but obviously I can't exactly see inside your brain, so I can't know 100% for sure. But as always, make sure that you're really summarizing every single sentence as you read through the passage. Like when you're reading something, read the first sentence, then take a step back and try to summarize what that sentence actually meant. Then do the same for the next sentence and then the same for the next. If you want a way to do it that's maybe a bit simpler, one thing you can also try doing is clearly visualizing each sentence in your mind. So like, for example, with this one here, we talk about these fruit flies. You could specifically imagine, like, let me try to find a sentence here. So they assessed Drosophila melanogaster resistant pathogenic infections by these things and that thing, bacteria common in flies environments. So I'm imagining here we have these fruit flies and they're like putting like maybe green stuff on them that's trying to like infect them. And I'm literally imagining that in my mind. Like I'm visualizing that exact scenario in a laboratory experiment. And then I'm also visualizing this as I read it, which is like we have these different strands of the bacteria. So like you can actually not bacteria, these are different mutations. So like I'm imagining some of the flies are DPT-A, some of them are DPT-B, some of them DPT-A and B. So I'm also imagining that in my mind. So either the two, either just like summarize it in your own words as you read, or try to clearly visualize what is going on. The visualization is a little bit harder though, because it's harder to tell if you're actually doing it. Okay, Fourth thing here, memorize the transition categories. I noticed on the transition questions, some of them you felt a little bit unsure with. In fact, one of the ones you wanted me to go over was a transitions question. One thing that's really useful for a lot of students is just memorizing my list of transition words and what categories they all fall into. I have it here in the community in the full reading and writing course. We have a Quizlet deck with them. Just go through that, memorize every single individual one, and I think you should notice that these should become at least a little bit easier as long as you're doing all the other stuff as well. 5 here, skip confusing passages. Honestly, maybe I should have put this higher up on the list because it is such an important thing, but it's only for the passage sections. So that's why I thought it wasn't that important. You obviously basically ran out of time for the passages, at least in math or in reading writing module 2, and kind of in reading writing module 1, you kind of didn't have enough time really. So what I really want you to think is just, as you're going through the passages specifically, when you see one that looks very complicated, very confusing, or just very long, skip it and save it for the end and just do all the other ones first of all. The strategy behind this is very simple. You just want to put the questions you're least likely to get it right in the first place at the end of the test because you're least likely to get them right anyway, so you might as well do the easier questions. A good example of this, this was one that was closer to the end anyways, but not exactly, so it still would have been useful. This one here with the fruit flies. You can just kind of tell looking at it, this is a complex graph. There's a lot of information here, and then all of these are like saying very niche things about the graph. I was just leaving this for the end and just solving all the other ones before you get to this. Just a very simple thing you can try doing. Likewise, this is another one that probably would have been useful for. This is a confusing, literally 15th century, would that be, or 17th century passage from Shakespeare. Obviously, this is going to be very confusing to understand. Like, nobody knows what Shakespeare is saying most of the time. So this is one where I would also suggest leaving it for the end. You may be thinking, like, would you not just be leaving pretty much every passage for the end? That's honestly okay. Like, if you leave like 5 passages for the end, at least you'll be able to do the ones you're very likely to get right first and just save those after you finish all those. So the skipping strategy is really, really important here. And one more thing along with this, it is okay to maybe even leave 1 to even as much as 3 passages just completely blank, or not blank, but like just choose a random answer, like just choose A for them if you really run out of time. I've explained this to several students before, but I've, looked at my own SATs I've taken before. I've looked at other people taking SATs on Blue Book practice tests and stuff like that. And the thing I always notice is in reading and writing module 2, when they're down to like maybe, let's say like they're down to 3 questions and they only have 1 minute left, so really not nearly enough time, what they do is almost never like they just, start rushing and try to, solve every single one of these 3 questions as fast as possible. What they more usually do is just spend the regular amount of time on one of those questions and then just choose a random answer for the other 2. So they might, spend like maybe as much as they can this one question and then just choose like a random answer like A or B for the other 2 questions. Hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying here. I guess it might work a little bit better if you have let's say you have 3 minutes left in 3 questions. So yeah, you can just really focus on that one question, the first one, and then the other 2, you can just, choose a random answer. This may seem like a little bit bad. It may seem like you should not be choosing a random answer for questions, but just kind of think about it this way. That's kind of what you already are doing. Like, you kind of already are just running out of time. You're rushing on these last ones. You're already probably not having the best accuracy. It could be very useful to just tell yourself, okay, I'm going to have to leave 2 of these with just a random answer. Now let me just focus on the one that I actually can focus on. Let me know if this doesn't make sense. I have whole, stuff about this in the course as well if you need some more explanation. Last thing I'll say here, this is, the least important out of these according to the order. Highlighting. I saw you do a lot of highlighting for passage questions. I would say try to reduce the amount that you're highlighting. So I know it might have been like a part of your strategy, but I find that, with what I recommend for people when reading passages, highlighting, while good, is not really necessary. And it might just be taking more time than you really are willing to put in. So let me know if there was a very good reason why you're highlighting, if it really was like a thing that was helping you a crazy amount, then okay, maybe you can still leave it in your strategy. But if it wasn't, if it's just something you felt like you had to do or that you're just throwing in there, it's probably not really benefiting you that much. And it probably, if anything, is kind of hurting you because it's probably causing you to spend more time than you really would have wanted to. Okay, that has a lot of stuff there. Let me go through a couple questions. So this one, a firefly uses specialized muscles to draw oxygen into its lower abdomen through narrow tubes, triggering a chemical reaction whereby the oxygen combines with chemicals in the firefly's abdomen to produce a glow. Okay, so basically just saying here, they take an oxygen, they do some stuff with it, and now that's why they glow on their body. When the firefly stops drawing in oxygen, the reaction in the glow ceases. So it's saying when they don't have oxygen, obviously, they can't glow. They don't have the ability to glow. So for that reason, it's pretty clear what's going on here. There's just a contradiction between the first sentence and the second one. First one saying, hey, they can glow. Second sentence is saying, hey, if they don't have the oxygen, they cannot glow. So that's really the key difference between the 2. So I would definitely go for something like by contrast here, and that is what I would go with. that is the only one out of these four that is really a contradiction choice. Specifically is in the specification category. In conclusion would be, I guess that basically cause and effect. Not exactly, but that more or less works. For instance would also be in specification. So for that reason, all these other ones would not be in the right one. If you want to know what each of those categories mean, you can go ahead and go through the flashcards like I said before. This one here, we have a student notes question. This was a really good one. I'm really glad you asked me to point out this one. So they want to refute a claim that malapportionment in the sorting favors small urban districts. So they want to say, no, it does not favor small urban districts. Maybe it favors something else. So I would go through this one and I probably would notice, this one is just completely contradictory because it says that they are favoring those. This one here, they overrepresent more populated districts. This one can maybe work. C, this one is just not really talking about the thing we need to talk about. And then D could also work. So since we're now between B and D, this is a situation where I really would now look at the notes because it seems like there's not really any clear reason why you would choose one over the other. The notes probably are going to help us, and they really do. If you see here, it says less populated rural districts with large tracts of land receive a disproportionate number of seats compared to smaller but more populated urban districts. So really it's saying here, the less populated rural districts are the ones that are getting everything. So we need to find a choice that says that. B. It's untrue that malapportionment in the thing favors small urban districts. Rather, the formula overrepresents more populated districts. So that's not it because it's saying less populated is more, not more populated. So this would just be wrong based off the notes. So therefore, it must be D. And it says here they overrepresent less populated rural districts. So math here. So really good stuff in math. I really did like a lot of what you did, like I said before. A couple of things here that I think are really important. These first two are definitely the most. First, use the loop strategy on any of the questions that you missed here. Now, this is also true for the reading and writing, obviously. It just didn't include it here. But for math, I think it really would help because there were some misses here where it really was just a matter of you not being familiar with the concept. A couple of things with Desmos, a couple of things with geometry. It was really just a matter of you didn't know how to do the problem. So using the loop strategy, really clearly trying to understand why you got wrong, which is probably just you didn't know the concept, and what you need to do to improve, which is actually, of course, learn the concept. This is going to help you a lot. And I think it's really the case, using this thing, it could help you improve a lot even just before your next practice test. And a lot of students I talk to, they feel like this isn't as useful as it may seem. They think it's not going to be that beneficial, but really, it just kind of is, because if you're using this thing, if you're actually trying to review each mistake and understand what you're supposed to do better, there's not really any way you will not at least improve a small amount. Maybe it won't be a huge amount, but at least you are going to definitely improve. Second thing here, become more familiar with geometry. So kind of obvious here, there were some misses here that you struggled with in geometry that were really just a matter of, I think, not understanding fully some of the concepts, or not even just the concepts, but also just how to do some of these more complicated problems. There are a few geometry questions that were like, a little bit weirder than your average, just, basic, simple geometry question. So try to get a bit more familiar with that. The geometry and trigonometry course here in Mission 1400 Plus is really good on that stuff. I've had people even tell me that they thought it was like one of the most beneficial things on geometry they've ever seen, like genuinely. So go through that and go through all the practice problems in there. I think that's going to help a lot with this because it's not also just the concepts, it's also just being able to use it on more complex problems, which is hard to get unless you really are doing geometry. Third thing here, math comprehension. I noticed you mentioned this at the end as for like a reason why you got one of the questions wrong. You're just confused as for what the math said. A couple things on this. Let me see if I have a good example down here. So I guess, I guess this kind of works. Yeah, this is pretty much a good one. So two things that might help you when you get to these complex math passages, so to speak, is one, try to treat them a bit like you actually treat reading passages. So this is kind of simple advice, but I explained this thing up here about trying to summarize as you read, trying to really clearly visualize in your mind as you read. Try to do that same thing actually on these math passages. And you'll find that they probably will be just as beneficial because you're going to notice, okay, this sentence means this thing, and I'm clearly imagining that in my mind. This sentence means this thing, I'm clearly imagining that. And now you just realize, okay, now it all makes entire sense, rather than just trying to read this whole thing and just hope the information sticks. So try to read like you do for passage questions. Second thing I would say with this, for these more specially complicated ones, taking notes is so useful. I've explained this to so many students recently. I'm not sure if this is just something that I'm feeling more confident in or something, or just more people are coming to me with this exact problem. But when you see a very complicated thing like this, it can be useful just to jot down a few pieces of information. For example, for this one, I might say here, so we're trying to take the mean of A, so like mean A, and then subtracting the mean of B. That just makes it a lot clearer what is going on here. And then I could also say here that there are 23 integers, so 23. And then I could say that, yeah, just a histogram. So I can just say H for that. So now you can see here, it's pretty clear what is going on in this problem just because I've written all this information down. So the note taking here is very useful. And on the SAT, you should be given a piece of paper. If they don't give it to you, you should be able to ask for it. You can use that piece of paper for this process. Hopefully those two things helped. Okay, a couple just like random specific things I wanted to point out. First of all, I think there is an issue in one of the questions involving degrees mode. So when you're here on Desmos, when you're dealing with something like sine, cosine, or tangent in really any situation, you always have to go here and switch it to degrees mode. The SAT is going to be on radians mode for when you first started. Degrees is what you have to switch for this to work. Otherwise, it is not going to work and it's going to fall apart. I think this was what you had done on the sine, cosine, tangent problem that you were missing. So always make sure to do that. Next thing here is factoring. Okay, so this is a really important rule. I talk about this in the Desmos course, which you can obviously check out. But basically, the way to think about this is that if you have a polynomial like x minus 3, let's say x minus 6, if I write that, I can then go ahead and just write one of the factors for that. And the way that I know it's a factor is because they both share the same x-intercept, 3, 0. If they did not share the same x-intercept, like if I had x minus 8, we can see here, yeah, these would not be factors. But this one would be because it has the same exact x-intercept for at least one of them. So that's just a very useful rule. I think this would have saved you for one of the problems, and many people do not know this when they first start using Desmos, so definitely understand that. 6 here, equivalent expressions. So again, I talked about this a bit in the Desmos course, but for example, with a problem like this, I think you eventually got to it in the end, but here's how I would say to solve it. Just go ahead and write the thing, which I think you did definitely do that step, and then just write each of the different things that are given to you for the choices and just see which one matches. So yeah, so this one appears to match for that first choice there. So therefore A would just definitely be the answer for that one. For these kinds of problems, you do not need to do anything with like plugging in a choice for x. You don't need to like plug in 3 for x and just test out each number. You can just look at the graphs themselves, which makes this so much easier. There was another equivalent expressions problem as well that I saw there where it's like p was equal to something. When you have something where it's like a variable is equal to something else, that is when you have to put in a random value. So if it's like p is equal to 5 over j plus 5, I would actually have to say j must be equal to 7, and now p is equal to that, and then I can go ahead and test each answer choice they give me. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, I have some stuff on this in the course. And then one last, quick thing here is exponential versus linear. I assume you probably understand this, but I should just kind of point it out because it seemed like you maybe did get at least one problem incorrect because of it. A linear thing is something where it's just a straight line. So if I have something like this, like 3x plus 7, that is linear. When it's exponential, that means it is basically going to be curved. So something like this. So yeah, this would be an exponential function rather than a linear. A couple of questions here. First one we have here with this exponential function. Okay, I guess we do have an exponential there. So it says f of 1 is k, where k is a constant, which gives the equivalent form of a function that shows k as the coefficient or the base. First of all, just for what that means, coefficient or base, coefficient is of course this number, base is this number. And now what we're trying to do, I was kind of confused when I saw this problem myself for the first time, but I realized what you just need to do is just plug in each of these and see which one gives you the right situation. So let me explain what that means. So for the first one, we say f of x is equal to 50 times 1.6 times x plus 1. Okay, so we have that here, and we say f of 1, that would be 128. 128 is not in either of these things, so that would not be the right answer for sure. For the second one, 80 times that, and then we have just 1 here. We get 128 again. 128 again is not in there, so B cannot be right. And this next one here, we have 128 and then x minus 1. Okay, now it works. 128 is there, and 128 is also included in there, so therefore C would be the right answer for this, and D is also going to give you the same problem. This one, it's a very good problem here, so a couple of just quick things. So we have this triangle. This is what it looks like. This would be a right angle, and it gives us the information. So since we have both a side measurement and an angle measurement, this is really, feeling SOHCAHTOA vibes. If you ever see a side and an angle, you're almost definitely going to have to use SOHCAHTOA to solve the problem. So let me just make sure I'm in degrees mode. Yep, I am in degrees now. So we can just think here, how can we find this XY side with the 33 degrees? Well, if you're familiar with SOHCAHTOA, tangent of 33 would be the opposite, which would be this side, over the adjacent, which would be this side. So we can say tangent of 33 is equal to opposite divided by 26. And then we get here, this side must be 16.8846. So that's good. That's what this side would be. And it says the area would be k tangent of 33. So the area of a triangle is half times base times height, or half times 26, which would be the base, times 16.8846, which would be the height. and that must be equal to k tangent of 33. And then we see here 338 point, all these zeros and 5. That's almost definitely just trying to say 338 and just, kind of rounding error there. So the answer would just be 338. So that's the process here. All we really did here is use SOHCAHTOA for the first step, and then I just made an equation using the area thing that they gave us for the second step. Okay, for this one here with the histograms, well, I kind of already just started this problem off. So we are trying to find the mean of the first thing and then subtract the mean of B. So we have to think, what is the way we can get the smallest possible difference between the two? Well, it would be if we had this thing being as small as possible and this thing being as big as possible. Like, think about what this would be like if you're trying to think of numbers between 0 and 10. If we choose the number 1, that is a very small number for this. And if we choose the number 10 for this, 1 minus 10 would be -9, which is a much smaller number and can be negative for stuff like this. If you want to make it where it's positive, we could say something here like if this was, let's say that this was 5 and then this was 4, 5 minus 4 would be equal to 1. If we were to make either of these different, like if we made this one bigger, 8 minus 4 now becomes 4 as the difference. And that'd be bigger than just 1. So you can see here, you want to make A as small as possible, you want to make B as big as possible, and that's going to give you the best possible result. Okay, then the process for this, it's a bit tedious. I really think the best way of solving this is just going ahead and writing out the different stuff because you can do it fairly simply. And I believe it would reduce the chances of you making a mistake, even though it's a lot of stuff you'd have to write in. At least you are not gonna have to do any kind of calculations that are beyond what's just given to you in Desmos. So it will take a second, but let me just go ahead and choose the smallest number possible for A. What this will literally just be is just the exact number given. So this would be like 20. So we do 20 times, that'd be 3. So 3 of 20. And then 30, that'd be 4 of 30. Then we have 7 of 40. And then we have, let's see, that'd be 9 of 50. And we see here we have 23 things here, so that's probably going to be correct for that. And then for B, we just choose the biggest ones possible. It says here that they are each integers, so they have to be whole numbers. But we have 10 through 20, so for that one, it would be something like 19. Then we have 20 through 30, that would be 29, and just so on and so forth. Okay, we have the second one here as well, so I can just go ahead and say mean of A minus the mean of B. And yes, that would give us 1 for the answer. Okay, so really good stuff here. Just last thing I want to say real quick is top priority right now should definitely be to use the loop strategy and all the missed problems from this entire test. I think that's going to be very beneficial for you and help you identify whatever it was that was hurting you on each of these problems that you went through. So definitely make sure to do that and let me know if you have any questions on anything at all. If you have any questions about any of these problems, you can definitely make sure to post it in the community and I'll definitely get back to you on that. Thanks so much. All right, that's it. Again, if you want this for yourself, check the link in the description below. I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure to always stay Gucci.